So Neil Deeds is our last speaker for this particular session. He's the executive vice president. Did you know you were the executive?
No, I think I got a promotion there.
There's a promotion in this within Terra.
Thanks, Daniel.
I know Neil as a groundwater modeler.
Yes.
But he has also done a great number of recharge projects of various flavors, and he's going to come talk to us about that today.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I also appreciated when Scott showed the evolution of man there, and I noticed that Mike and I fell kind of right before we were fully evolved. So I guess, Mike, you get the pointy stick, and I'm going to take the club, if that's okay with you, and that's okay. I'm comfortable in that pointy stick position, all right? So today I'm going to talk about, I look at the slides and you can't hear me. I'm going to talk about, yes, this is working, yes, enhancing water supply resilience at Fort Hood through ASR. Y'all might notice in your program that it was called Fort Cavazos just a little while ago, and they switched it back to Fort Hood. I don't really have a dog in that fight, other than Fort Hood is a little easier for me to pronounce. I did not take Spanish in high school. I took French, which you're nodding going, yeah, that looks like the kind of guy that would take French. But this was in rural Nebraska, so you can imagine the quality of the lectures I was getting, so it might as well have been Swahili, because I don't know French or Spanish, but it does explain some things for sure. So all right, let's talk about Fort Hood. Established 1942, about 214,000 acres. It's a big one for sure. 36,000 active duty personnel, and the primary purpose, key location for U.S. Army's armored operations. You can see it right on the sign there, home of Armored Corps. So what was the objective of this project? And did I hit the right button there? Sweet. These project objectives come straight from Mr. Dosa, who is the director of the Directorate of the Public Works, which is a mouthful. But he said the project objectives are to provide the Army with a redundant source of drinking water located on post. It was very important to them that they have a resilient water supply, and by resilient, they mean the supply is actually inside their gates, where they can defend that supply. And currently it is not that way, so they're trying to achieve that as one of the objectives. They want to increase resiliency to support soldiers, units, and families, and it also, and I think this is a good point that he made, provides value to the surrounding region. The reason for that is because the fort itself is the biggest user of water in the area, and when times get tough or there's an emergency, you can imagine the fort is going to get the water first, because that's what's important for our defense. And so if they can make their water supply more resilient, then it's going to benefit the other communities that are being served by the same water supply during those times. Oh wait, I don't know if you saw a picture of that tank, but that'll be relevant in just a minute. So let's do outline. We're going to talk about ASR concepts. Probably most of you are in this room and already know about ASR, but I'll go over it really quick. We'll talk about the aquifer characterization work we did, where we drilled a test well, did some aquifer testing, and we'll also talk about ASR well field. I say construction there, but really we're in the design phase right now, so we're going to talk about the design. And I'll call out David Smith sitting down there. He's been leading this project. I did the first part of it, David's leading the second part, so David, step up to the mic and tell me I'm wrong when I am. I'm joking, don't ever tell me I'm wrong. Later, okay. All right, so let's look at a diagram of ASR. So the idea here is that we are recharging through a well, so we're making that distinction between what Mike was talking about and what Scott was talking about for the most part, although you all still have one well going. But for the most part, they were talking about infiltration basins. Here we're talking about drilling a well and we're recharging through a well. So what happens when you put water in the ground in a well is it starts to form what we call a bubble. And it's basically displacing the native water around the well, and it pushes that native water away with the idea that once you form this bubble of that treated water, when you recover it, you're recovering the treated water. You're not recovering groundwater. So you're going to get water that's of similar quality to what you recharged. And that's a key aspect of what we're trying to achieve here. You may accept that you get a little bit of native water mixing, but for the most part, you're really trying to design a system that recovers the exact same water that you put in. And this is just a diagram of kind of how these systems are typically used, but it's intuitive. You can't put water in the ground if you don't have excess water, Excess water usually occurs either in the wintertime when you don't have so many demands on your system as a municipality, or in a wet year where people aren't using as much water. So whether it's wintertime or a wet year, when you have excess capacity, you're trying to build up your bank account. If you think of an ASR as a bank account, then you're trying to put money in the bank for that time when you need to withdraw it. So the whole point is to do the work up front to understand whether the water supplier actually has excess water. You can't do ASR without excess water. It does not create water. It just uses the water that you have. So where are we? Well, I'm in San Antonio. I don't know about y'all, but so we're down here. And then a lot of you folks probably live north of San Antonio. I see some natives here, but a lot of you probably live north. So you know if you go about 3 hours up I-35, it could be 6 hours depending on traffic, but let's say it's 3 hours and you're clear. You get up near Killeen and Temple and that area, and that's where our study area is. So I put it on all the major aquifers just to point out that the aquifer that we're talking about is this Northern Trinity aquifer. So it's in kind of light green here. You got Hill Country Trinity down here, you got Edwards here, and then you got Crezo Wilcox and Gulf Coast falling off this way. So what you got to remember about all of these aquifers starting about here and going southeast is they're all dipping towards the coast. They all get deeper as you move towards the coast, and the Trinity is no exception. So if we look at a cross-section, okay, we're not looking at a cross-section. Let's look at the cross-section. When we look at a cross-section, what you can see is on the western side, basically we're at outcrop up here. And then as you move down into our study area, we're getting to a point where the very bottom of the Trinity is about 1,000 feet deep. So that's not too deep yet. That's not too expensive at a well. And as you move further east in the Trinity and get past some of this faulting, the Trinity gets very deep and it gets very thick and it gets very productive. In places. In Bell County, certainly where we are, it does. What we didn't know is when we're back up here in the shallower zone where the lower Trinity or Austin formation is of some unknown thickness, we didn't really know, whether it was going to be productive enough for us to be able to make a recharge project out of it. So I'm going to flip back and talk about this study area. So remember, Trinity is getting deeper, thicker, more productive going from west to east. This gray shaded area is the post, and so we were pushing all the way we could to the east to get all the way to the eastern border of that post in order to be able to try to get the deepest and thickest Trinity formation we could. But it was really speculation. We didn't know what we were going to get, and that's why we had to do this test well program. All right, let's take a quick look at the site map. So this is just straight north. So we're coming in from the east on this road. It's how you get onto the fort. And then right south of that is this tank track. So that's kind of this Caliche Road right here. In between is a 54-inch pipeline from WCID number 1. That is the main source of water for the fort. And basically what they told us was don't park your trucks on the tank track, for one, for obvious reasons, right? I mean, I think what he said to me was the U.S. government is not responsible for any damage caused to your vehicle by a M1 tank, which I believed, so we kept our trucks off there. And we got a little bit south of that tank track and about 500 feet apart. So we estimated that based on what we thought the well might make, we needed 500 feet between the pumping well and the observation well. But we really didn't know what we were going to get, so the order that I was under was drill a monitor well, 4-inch, costs $150,000, see what you get. If you get something that you think's okay, then you drill the production well, it's another $300,000, and we do our pump test, we do all that. So the first thing we did was we drilled that monitor well. So what did we get for findings? Well, we had 3 potential fatal flaws. Either the Austin, so the unit that we want is either not there or it's clay. That wasn't true. It was sandy and it was there. Second one was either it's really high percentage of clay and shale. Actually, I combined 1 and 2 when I said it before. So it had to be present and thick, and it had to be sandy. So that's 1 and 2. And the third one was a static water level might be too deep. And that becomes important basically to get enough water above your pump in order to be able to produce water. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the next couple of slides. So you probably can't read any of the text on this, but just the yellow is sand. And so this is the very bottom of the lift log. So we're going all the way to the bottom of the well. So the bottom of that's about 1,000 feet. I'm having trouble hit the screen here, and I can't even read it anyway. So look at the bottom of that well, and basically that's at about 1,000 feet. So what you see at the bottom is what we were looking for. We have this nice sand package. It's about 80 or 90 feet thick. and we're hoping it's going to be productive. We don't know at this point, but the good thing you're seeing is you got gravel and well-sorted sands in there, and we're just hoping that we're going to get some productivity out of that. But it was certainly enough to move to the next step, drill the production well, and see what we got. So production well, it was 8-inch SDR17 PVC. I should say, $500,000 was spent on this, and it was really impressive, the community coming together to make the project happen. $500,000 is a lot of money. We still kind of had to do it on a shoestring because wells are expensive. So we built this thing from PVC. 1,000 feet deep is pretty deep for PVC, so we had to be real careful putting it in and when we were doing the cement job, but it all worked out just fine. In the end, we tested at about 250 gallons a minute. We think we can get about 400 gallons a minute out of a properly constructed well if we're pulling the water level all the way down. We had a really nice hydraulic conductivity, 10 feet per day, which may or may not mean anything to anybody in this room other than a couple of guys over here. And then the storativity is fairly low. The reason for that is it's a pretty thin unit. So, if you have 80 feet, storativity is just not going to be very high. And why is that important? It means that you're going to get interference between your wells if you don't space them properly. So that's just something to keep in mind. I put this graph here because if you see the response on a semi-log plot, this is the most perfect TICE response I've ever seen in an actual major pumping test. And I'm so proud of it, I show it all the time, even though people don't really care. But I'm still going to continue to show it until they make me stop. This is the motor we used in the production well. And what's interesting about it is it has 18 stages, because it's quite a lot of lift to pull water from 900 feet all the way to surface in a pretty skinny well. And so it was interesting to me to see what kind of pump they brought in. Hard hat, cigarette, that's exactly what a driller should look like, except no differences. All right. So when we're doing the design and permitting, our performance objectives are based on what the objectives of the fort are. And they had two objectives. Basically, they wanted to be able to do 2 million gallons per day recovery for 5 months, so that's drought management. And the second thing they were looking for was 4 MGD recovery for 15 days, and that's an emergency response. That means that the water source actually goes down and they're relying completely on the ASR. In the other case, the 2 MGD case, WCID number 1 is put in a drought plan, and they're asking the fort to take a haircut on what they're using. And instead of taking the haircut, the fort could actually use their ASR. In order to achieve those two, we need 3 to 400 million gallons of storage, and we're trying to figure out how many wells and about how much those wells are going to produce. We're thinking about 500,000 gallons per day, which is about 350 gallons a minute, and we're going to need about 8 wells. That's what we were going in thinking. So how do you figure it out? Well, you got to run some models, and we modeled to look at hydraulics, interference. You heard Scott talk about the different interference that he can get when he's stacking wells vertically or when he's got these ones that talk horizontally. We know these things are going to interfere horizontally, like this diagram shows here. If you have that drawdown that's the red curve for one well, when you put 3 wells in, they all talk to each other, they all interfere with each other, and you have to consider that when you're doing multiple wells. So the first part of the modeling is hydraulics, understanding interference. The second part is recoverability, which is if I put water in, can I take the same water out? Now, I said that's the objective of an ASR, but you have to demonstrate you can do that in order to get your TCQ permit. So there were those 2 goals of the modeling was operational, which is hydraulics, and well design, and then the second part was for permitting. All right, so let's talk about ASR hydraulics. So on the left-hand side, we're thinking about injection and recharge. So we're thinking about being able to recharge. Again, I'm not seeing my cursor. Maybe I just can't see. Left-hand side is recharge, and on the right-hand side is when we're withdrawing. And so our initial static water level, if you remember from a few slides ago, was at about 485 feet below ground surface. We had another 430 feet above the top of the aquifer at about 900. And so when we're recharging, we can stack 480 feet of water on top of that water column. You do the math, that's a couple hundred PSI, that's a pretty good injection pressure. And so we may just be able to recharge through static, but of course we're modeling to see whether we can. And if the static water level is closer to ground surface, you can pressurize your wellhead. So you can design the wellhead to be able to take some pressure. And we estimated here about 60 PSI. It could be higher, it could be lower. But if you do have a pretty short distance to your static water level from ground surface, you are allowed to pressurize the wellhead under some designs. On recovery, this is a more standard kind of consideration for all pumping wells. you need enough water above your pump to be able to draw it down and actually create the gradient that moves the water into the well. So again, we had about 400 feet of it, so we're feeling pretty good about it. But we have to make sure that when we design this well field and when we start recovering, that we don't drop the water level above the top of the aquifer where the pump's set. Most of y'all know when you drop the water level below the pump starts pumping air when it should be pumping water. It burns the motor out. Everybody's unhappy, and except for the pump guys, right, Scott? Then, you know, they're in good shape. They can come replace pumps and stuff. Yeah. All right, so this was the initial configuration, and on the left-hand side, which I won't go through too much, but basically it's just showing what our operational assumptions were. When the black line, the solid black line is up here, we're recharging, then we're not recharging, we're recharging, and then we're recovering. So 0 is right here, so below the 0 we're recovering. So basically what we're doing is we're doing 2 recharge cycles, and then we're simulating that 5 months of recovery, and then we're simulating that 15 days of recovery. And remember, the 5 months was at 2 MGD, the 15 days was at 4 MGD, and so what is happening to the water level in those wells? When you recharge, it goes up, but it does not reach ground surface. We got plenty of room between ground surface and the peak of where this water level is. And then when we recover, 2 MGD, we're down here, plenty of room between the top of that formation and where that water level is decreased. But when we recover at 4 MGD, you can see we have broken the well field. So the initial modeling we did with 6 wells, 1,000 feet spacing, said wasn't going to work. So we sharpened our pencils, did a little additional modeling, and this is where David came in and did tweaks to the design and worked with our modelers, and we ended up with a system that had 9 wells at 600 feet spacing. And you say, well, why are you spacing them closer than you did before? Well, one advantage of spacing them closely in recharge wells is that you can get the recharge water to commingle between the wells. So the bubbles are actually running into each other, and they're they are commingling together, and they're making kind of one big bubble along the line of wells. The advantage to that is that you will get better recoverability in the long run. So David was able to make this design, 9 wells, 600 feet spacing, and we're drawing down right here, and the drawdown is not reaching 900 feet, which means we're in good shape, still got water above the pump, so move forward. Kind of last thing I'll show you on the modeling is this is where we're modeling recoverability, and we're doing it with a model called particle tracking, or a modeling technique called particle tracking, and that's just a way to be able to tell where your recharge water is gone and where it exists in the aquifer. The reason we're thinking about that is because groundwater moves under natural gradient. So if you put water in the ground and you just leave it there, it's going to tend to drift. And when it drifts away from the well where you recharged it, when you start recovering, you may not get all that water back. And that's part of that recoverability that's so important to us when we're trying to get the permit. So you can see the way David designed it, though, was the gradient's actually going from west to east, and I'm not showing it, but if you put your alignment in that west to east order, even if you start getting drift along that well alignment, you can recover the water from the down gradient wells. So aligning your wells along the gradient is actually one technique you can use when designing in order to improve your recoverability. All right, and just to talk a little bit more about recoverability, because it's so important to our permitting process at this point, is it is the measure of the percent of the recharge water that you can demonstrate that you can recover. And you don't have to recover all the recharge water. You can say to the TCEQ, we're going to put in 100 million gallons, it's going to be a buffer, and we're never going to recover it. And then the recoverability is based on all the rest of the water that you put in. And for this case, when we did the modeling, we ended up with something very close to 100% recoverability. So we added a buffer zone, but these two lines, the orange and green line on the right-hand side, you can see they kind of overlap each other, and that means that everything that we're taking out is the same water we were putting in. So over this short operational period, we're getting near 100% recoverability, which is what we want, and that's what we want to be permitted for. That won't happen in every case, but in this case, it's simple enough we can do it that way. I did note that if you try to over-recover and you break your recoverability on the permit, theoretically then the groundwater district, which for our case would be Clearwater in Bell County, would have jurisdiction over your well. And the idea with this permitting process is that jurisdiction is only TCEQ, it's an ASR well, and we will only recover up to what our TCEQ permit says. It's not like Clearwater can't say we can over-recover. We could get permits for that, but we don't have permits for that. So our intention is to never over-recover in this case. All right, so where are we? We demonstrated that the design works. We need to do an actual construction of a demonstration well. So no 8-inch PVC sketchy well design. I'm saying sketchy because it was my design. I could say that, but it worked. But we'll do demonstration of a well construction, properly PWS well, do a cycle testing program, and then eventually do that full well field build out. So what we're hoping is the next couple of years we'll achieve those first 2 bullets with a demonstration well program and that cycle testing program. And that will tell us whether we can do the full build out. 5 minutes, sweet. I'm actually in pretty good shape then. The reason you do a demonstration well is because you can do characterization, you can do a lot of modeling, you can really think you understand the system, but there's a lot of subtleties to ASR design that David can tell you more about in terms of geochemistry and how the recharge water is going to react with the native water and the native matrix. And so you want to make sure with a demonstration well that you really have all of those parameters right in terms of what you're recharging and what reactions may occur before you start doing full build out. And just acknowledgments. So I said there were a bunch of folks from the community that came together for funding. That was Colleen EDC, Harker Heights, Copperas Cove, and the Copperas Cove Chamber. Ton of support from Clearwater, from Dirk Aaron. You guys, some of you guys probably know him. He and the district were very supportive of this. They're very supportive of ASR in general. I can't thank them enough. Bell County WCID #1 put in a lot of the money, and it's their water that's going to be going in the ground. And so I thank them. And then, of course, Fort Hood is the actual owner of this project. So I think that is all the slides I have. That is all the slides I have. That was supposed to be hidden, but you can look at that, and I won't try to explain it unless you have a question.
Some hard questions for Neil.
Easy questions? All right, Grant.
Well, as a young company grade officer, I spent a lot of time in that neighborhood, so it's near and dear to my heart. I didn't hear you talk much about water quality. It's Fort Hood's system water is the source water, right?
It is. So it's treated water that's coming in from the east, and basically they do some chlorination along the way, but there's no other treatment, so that'll go in as is.
Okay. And are you going to use recharge through the pump or the annulus or both?
David?
We'll be using a downhole control valve, a basket control
Ah.
valve, something similar to prevent cascading and air training.
Perfect. Perfect.
So if y'all didn't hear that, we're using a basket control valve, which allows you to not get air entrainment when you're putting the water in.
Okay. And any water quality issues raise their ugly head at all?
No geochemistry issues, but the main thing to highlight is the native groundwater is approximately 1,100, 1,200.
It's 1,500 actually, yeah.
So we've got to make sure we displace the native slightly brackish water.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you.
Good questions, Grant.
Neil, no questions, but you will also have that other well in Temple, and there's some differences between the Temple well and the Fort Hood well. Can you elaborate on that real quickly?
Yeah, you bet. So Temple, the city of Temple, which is to the east, so they're over the portion of the aquifer that's much deeper, so over 2,000 feet. They recently drilled a well that's a large capacity well, so we're doing over 2,000 gallons a minute on it. And Temple does want to do an ASR program. They're in the middle of kind of first steps on it, doing feasibility and permitting. David's working on that as well. And I think the really cool thing about Temple is they were the folks that sponsored that bill to allow for recycled water to go in the ground, because they have every intention of using their reuse water in their ASR program. So I feel like they're really got ahead of the curve in kind of, not forcing, I don't want to say it that way, but TCEQ had a very difficult time finding a regulatory pathway forward for recharging recycled water, and that legislation cleared that up and made it possible. Good question.
Any other questions? Here comes the hard.
I know. James, man. All right.
So I saw in your model you had modeled for the hydrologic gradient. It was pretty low. I'm sorry if I missed this, but with the 100% recovery, it looks like there's very little hydrologic gradient that you're worried about with the storage bubble. Did I catch that correctly?
Yeah, so
Okay.
so that's a really good question. And we kind of, I would say for the permit that I'm showing right now, we're only modeling the demonstration well for that last recovery curve. And so we're not leaving the water in the ground that long. I think that if we left it in longer, we might start to see those two curves diverge where we're not getting 100% recovery. But for the purposes of the initial permitting, I'm confident that 100% recovery is a good estimate. I mean, when we do the demo well, obviously we're going to find out because we're going to be measuring, and we'll actually be able to see the recharge water break through the monitor wells. So those two wells will stay in the ground as monitor wells, and we'll see it break through, and we'll be able to see it pull back, and we'll be able to know what the actual dispersivity of the system is. So that'll be important for that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, James.
I've got one.
Yes, sir.
For the 9-well system, controls, pumps, everything. Price tag.
David, he was over there chatting. What was the estimated cost for this system, if we can reveal that? Just ballpark it. I think it was like 35.
No, it's
Less than that? Good.
Yeah, I don't have.
Okay, let's say under 30 if you think it wasn't, so under 30 million, but probably close to that. 1,000 feet. There's a lot of a lot of other systems besides just the wells that are adding to the cost. Yeah.
So less expensive than a lake.
I mean, there's no place to build a lake there, but yes, it is. Yeah.
So that's 2,400 nutrient.
So the 4 MGD, that sounds about right. Yeah. Yeah. Any other? Thanks. Great.